Hello, welcome to part two of Ask Me Anything on P Gurus. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you want to abuse us, please do so in the comments. Just remember, it adds to the algorithm. So thank you very much, even for your abuses. First question, Pratik Mangwani. Thoughts on India entering anti-China military alliance with bordering countries such as Vietnam, like NATO, which tries to counter Russia? Uh, Good. Look, everything has its positives and its negatives. I think it's very important we don't repeat the same mistake Ukraine did, which is constantly needle Russia and provoke, let sleeping dogs sleep kind of thing. The problem here is China is extremely aggressive. So, do we actually form a NATO or do we not? I don't think we should. If other Southeast Asian countries and America form a NATO, let them. Personally, I feel what we should do is be a bit like Sweden, which is officially neutral, but when push comes to shove, everybody knows that we will join NATO. Of course, now NATO, Sweden has formally joined NATO, but before, through the Cold War, it was officially neutral. But there was no doubt that if Sweden got attacked, NATO would support them, and if war broke out with NATO, Sweden would support them. Next. Deepak Bhatt, hypothetically, if China, USA calls a truce, does that mean India's economic and or strategic relevance dies? Yes, it does. And in fact, that is what Obama tried to do. People tend to forget what a creepy, mischievous president he was. He created this concept of G2, which would have been a rehashing of the hegemony that the USA and USSR had, which would have kind of forced India to be either in this camp or that camp. It would have certainly completely eliminated our strategic relevance. Because unlike the opposition out there in the World War, what his G2 was cooperation. And he did. In fact, the proof of concept was how G2, India very naively held out on climate negotiations, believing that China was principled and all of that. And then Obama goes and negotiates a climate deal with China, and India's left out in the cold. And when we asked for the same deal, they said, no, screw you. For you, the deal is going to be a lot harsher. So, yeah, that's exactly what was going to happen. Next. Bakul Dada, isn't this putting the Five Eyes setup to shame, if not collaborating for coming up with wrong conclusions on Canada? No. And I'll tell you why. The thing is, they can provide you with raw intel. Raw intel is never conclusive. It's little pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. It can be anything in the end. It's the classic example is like a master chef surprise challenge. You're given, if every participant is given the exact same ingredients, but every participant makes something totally different out of it. It all depends on the interpretation, and it was up to Canada to do the interpretation. Next. 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙪 𝙤𝙧𝙤𝙪. Your views on Arun Jaitley as a troubleshooter of the NDA 14 to 19. Also, is there possibility of George Soros and all this ruckus created by Justin Trudeau? Part two, no, I don't think so. Though he'll try to get involved in this. That is to say, George Soros. And Arun Jaitley was a fantastic troubleshooter. He had a fantastic ability to reach across the aisle and sort out issues before they blew up. But remember, that was also when Sonia still had influence and things like that. Now that Rahul has taken over, I don't know if Arun Jaitley would have been able to suffer an idiot like him very easily. Next. Karthik Vishwanathan, it is said that to attack 𝗎 rocket force, strategic support force, looking at radars and 𝗎 insider. What? I'm sorry, Karthik, you have to reframe that question. I didn't understand it at all. Next. Narayan P, is it true that a top German rocket scientist was denied Indian citizenship by Nehru? I don't know. But remember, a lot of German aircraft and rocket engineers were actually welcomed by Nehru. It doesn't sound like Nehru. Nehru loved Gora Admis. So if a German rocket scientist wanted to come to India, he would have very happily given him the thing. In fact, it was our Marut was designed and made by a German guy who was celebrated in India. In fact, if you watch the movie The Bunker, that lady aviator, I've forgotten her name, who was the last person to see Hitler alive, she came to India and she was a great friend of Nehru, and she was crucial in setting up all the flying clubs and everything in India. So that doesn't sound right, Narayan. Just logically speaking, I don't know about the specifics of the case, but logically. Vivan Sachdeva, have you read about Whitney Webb and a book about the CIA and mafia connection since World War II controlled by the deep state? Is it the same in India? I haven't read the book, but I can tell you that, one great thing about Mussolini was that he completely wiped out the mafia. Mafia thrived when there was no industrialization in the South, and Mussolini started bringing industrialization to the South, and he wiped it out. For 10 years, Italy was mafia free. More, 12, 15 years almost, Italy was mafia free. It was the Americans who brought back the mafia, ingratiated themselves with the Allies, and they said, look, we will go set up our networks. The South is where the Allied invasion began. We will set up all the networks for you to come and integrate with the local population and this and that. And it was America that recreated the mafia in the South very much as part of the World War II invasion of Italy plans. So it is actually true. And in fact, it became an absolute bane because they had, the mafia tended to be very anti-communist. Of course, technically, if you look at it, it's a small business. So during that entire Italian anti-communist phase, that Tangentopoli scandal and all of that, America was completely behind the mafia as a bulwark against communism. So yes, it was, but I haven't read the book. No. Siddharth Rao, have you been following semiconductor fabs being used in USA? No. 250 billion flowing in the Chip Act, surprisingly all being built in Republican states. No, Siddharth, I have not. This is probably a question for Sree. Next. Sid Dave, whites are becoming a minority in the US, not yet, but and Canada, not yet. Is that something that will lead to the decline of the Western world? No, it is the wokeism of the white in response to the rise of services that will be the decline of the Western world. It will be blamed on minorities, but understand the minorities are the symptom, they are not the cause. The cause, who let those people in? It was white majority America. Who changed all the rules to, allow unrestricted migration and the border being overrun and things like that? It was white majority America. So no, it is white majority America that will lead to the decline and destruction of America, but it will be blamed very conveniently on the minorities. Next, Loop Look. Do you think Jewar Airport is too far to overtake transit traffic from the Middle East? What is Jewar Airport, or is it purpose to cater natural in-house growth? Let me just first quick Noida Airport. Boss, look, as far as I think, as far as I'm hearing about things in Delhi, uh, they have no delusion that any Indian company is going to be able to overtake the Gulf carriers. And the Gulf carriers, the amount of access we give them is vital leverage against the populations of ours that they hold hostage in a sense, right? So no, I don't think by itself a hub can provide overtaking. For that, you need a quality airline, and I don't think the Tatas and Vistara are up to the job. You've seen the decline of Vistara. Vistara used to be such an amazing airline when it started up. Do you remember how it used to be? Its service used to be so outstanding that when you came out, every 2 feet of the baggage of the baggage conveyor belt, there used to be trolleys placed for you. Today, the staff are rude, they forget their own job, they're badly trained, they're terrorized into submission. It depends on an airline you have. I don't think any of our airlines are ready to take on this whole Middle East carrier monopoly. The Middle East carriers have a monopoly for a reason. They provide very good services for what they are. Next. Charit, Vivek Ramaswamy said he won't accept the vice president post as Trump is re-elected as president. If Trump is re-elected as president, you have to run with Trump in order to get elected, boss. Are you sure he said that? Because that doesn't sound like something Vivek would say. Next. Narayan P. What statement was given by the USA that we have told India in public and private to cooperate? Very simple. We have asked India to cooperate in the investigation, uh, which we're happy to, like we said. Provide us with proof. You can't just talk and expect cooperation. That's a fishing expedition. Give proof, you'll get cooperation. It's that simple. Next. Mr. Bharani, your idea about city planning is good to get the country's industrial output going. But what will happen to landlords that own commercial and rental properties or street vendors' small shops? Well, here's the thing. Commercial properties, remember, when you swap commercial and rental properties, you are swapping it. You are not changing it, you are swapping ownership. Okay. And you're swapping it on either a 49-year for commercial and 99-year for residential. More for commercial, but commercial value is based on yield. Okay. So it depends on how good decisions the landlords are taking, etc., and things like that, a function of business. Small shops, again, is that keeping up with business? You tell me how many groceries, small shops, and things like that actually run in developed countries. The small shops are called 911s and restaurants and things like that because the income simply isn't good enough. So, even there, the dynamics of a proper industrialized big city force everybody to move into higher value chains. Next. 𝗒𝙧𝙤𝙪 𝗢𝙠𝙤. I loved your dismantling of ex-Canadian CSIS on Times Now yesterday. Do you believe that Niger was cleaned up by the ISI as a task of tying up loose ends? No, I don't think Niger was cleaned by the ISI. I think he fell prey to, the gangs which do drug dealing and gun running in Punjab. It is chronic. They keep saying Khalistan, Khalistan to hide what their real business is. But remember, this is a front for a criminal business. That's it. Next. Sharvin Shelke, how would you analyze the performance of Modi considering more than full majority given by people? Why Modi lacks spine to implement reforms in UCC? I think UCC is going to be implemented. Look, he has to be cautious. Okay, I actually rate this term much better than term one. I think you've forgotten what he's done with Kashmir. Not only has he abrogated 370, he has also brought peace. When I went back to Kashmir this time, I was like, oh my God, this is how I remember it. When I went back in 2019, immediately about 2 months after, it didn't feel like, it still felt like a state of siege. But this time when I went back, it was amazing. It was truly amazing because, it felt like when I was growing up in Kashmir. You could go out for picnics. You can walk around without feeling scared at night. You could just walk around without feeling scared. Period. Why at night? So there's no stone pelting or anything going on. Air India has been privatized. There's a lot of coal and energy sector privatization that's happened. I think the second term has been quite good. Has he achieved in full measure? No, but has he achieved substantially? Yes. And I think that needs to be encouraged. Let's not judge now by what he has not done. Let's judge on what he has done and encourage him to do even more in the next term. Next. Siddhave, how did Sikhism become a Punjabi Jatt religion when it used to be pan-India? Very good question, because in all pre-industrial societies, what happens is you will invariably have a land-owning class, the most economically power-wielding class that ends up taking over the institutions of any organized religion, and that is what they did. Banda Singh, Panj Pyare were all from other parts of India. Sikh gurus were Khatris, yet 99% of Punjabi Khatris are Hindus. Yes, and that is why I'm saying it is because in all pre-industrial religion, it will always be the elites who take control. In Hinduism, because it is not organized religion, sure, you had Brahmins take control in certain things, but in most parts, it was the local communities that would take control of their own priests and things like that. But still, it would be local elites, different communities, different castes, but still elites within those castes and communities. In the Christian church, it was completely the nobility that controlled this thing. All the bishops and everything were related to the lord of the land and things like that. Same in the Buddhist, in Tibetan Buddhism and etc. etc. You'll always find that the elites take control. Next. Surit Chakravarti, Bhaiya, what are your views on Ayn Rand? What are your views on Soviet communist interference in India? Was it worse there in American or other countries? It was actually less in India because it wasn't direct, it was indirect, and it was soft touch. So it isn't as bad as it's frequently made out to be, but yes, it did exist and it was very in your face. And Ayn Rand, I really like Ayn Rand, but look, Ayn Rand is a very simplistic storytelling. I think there's a lot more complexity. I think, Atlas Shrugged is much more complex than, say, I mean, you see how Atlas Shrugged becomes much more complex than The Fountainhead. The Fountainhead is almost unidimensional, right? And Atlas Shrugged is much more uh, complex. The character of Dagny is much more complex than Rourke in Fountainhead. So, yeah, uh, I like Ayn Rand, but we need to move way past Ayn Rand as well. I think a lot more complexity is coming. Next. Siddharth Rao, why is US sending so much aid to Ukraine? Money laundering, boss. That's the clearest example. Most of the money given to Afghanistan was laundered back to elites in America and things like that. It is how you keep the economy running. It is how you sign up new contracts. It is how you expend old stock and place orders for new stock. And yes, it does affect everyone. Next. Roy 86. It's fine for the government to deal with Canada, but how will India deal with a potentially hostile deep state government? They won't get hostile right now. Remember, the hostility is still masked. If and when it slowly keeps emerging, then and it'll slowly be dealt with. Look, it's not like India doesn't have options, right? We do have options. The question is, how do we play around with it? With what China and Russia are doing with Iran in the Middle East, it's good for us because the more the tension grows in the Middle East, the less the American deep state's willingness to antagonize us. So in the long term, it's actually good for us. Sharvin Shelke. How would you rate Super Sukhoi upgrade? Why is IF still committed to Su-30 when they're outdated? Does India invest enough in intelligence gathering and reconnaissance? I think the last question I've already answered. We simply don't. Absolutely not. Classic example being, Balakot. We didn't have battle damage assessment. Battle damage assessment is the most crucial part of your reconnaissance and intel. Because if you can't verify that there were terror targets out there, or you can't publicly confirm that it was a terror target and what the nature of the target was, and then show the battle damage assessment to show it has been destroyed, not just to show. Look, Pakistan needs public humiliation to be humiliated. Private humiliation doesn't count for Pakistan. Okay, so this is also a conceptual flaw. But then, even for your own military, you crucially need battle damage assessment in order to decide whether you have to throw more resources at it or not. The joke during the Yemen war was that King Salman had Alzheimer's, so he used to forget what he had ordered bombed in the morning, and he'd ordered that rebombed in the afternoon. It's a joke. Salman does not have Alzheimer's, and that did not actually happen. But it's a very telling joke on the state of Saudi intelligence that they expended a lot on the actual kinetic part without the reconnaissance and intel part, which we don't do either. And look, boss, Sukhoi ka upgrade, there is only so much you can do with Russian technology without deep integration that Western technology comes with. A Lego set is never going to be a real car or a real plane. Basically, that's it. You can do all this mix and matching and think you're very smart, but you're really not. And that those upgrades, not really happening. Next. Vignesh Prabhu. When is your Tamil versus Kannada Brahmin food show? Yes, good idea. Please go troll Smita Prakash. She's gone on postponing it because obviously she knows she's going to lose because Tambaram food is just so superior, man. Next. Akash Mihir 84. What do you use Ambe Mohar rice for? So I use Ambe Mohar rice frequently in khichdi. I also use, aged parboiled Ambe Mohar rice for certain kinds of biryani. But good Ambe Mohar rice, I've only had good Ambe Mohar rice once. And the Ambe Mohar rice that I've ordered since then is not the same quality. And I've only been using it for khichdi. But that parboiled Ambe Mohar that I got once, which I've never been able to get again, was outstanding, but I've not been able to get it. So right now I'm ordering only from Birdwan. There's a very specific brand of rice that I order, which is beautifully fragrant. It's still nothing compared to Bangladeshi rice, which I have to smuggle in, but that's my standard short grain rice that I'm using these days. Next. Sharvin Shelke, what advantage does India gain from manufacturing when most of the money lies in intellectual property rights of product? India manufactures iPhone but doesn't have Desi Mobile. It is a stepping stone. It is much higher end employment than agriculture. That is the big advantage that India gains. IPR is, see, it is agriculture, industry, IPR. Okay, you can't get there till you've first gotten here. You first have to get here because not everybody here is capable of going here. Only 1 or 2% of the population is capable of going here. But 100% of your agricultural blue collar labor force is capable of becoming an industrial blue collar labor force, which, unlike agricultural income, which is highly unstable, becomes extremely stable and is significantly quantums higher than what you get paid here. That is why you need it. Next. Pikachu man, which are the defense experts like you in India? I don't know. I talk to a lot of them. I don't think 90% of them, boss, are just extremely publicity shy. They just don't want to talk. They don't want to rattle the cage or anything like that. But you can follow Zone 5 Aviation, Angad Singh. He's fantastic. He's truly fantastic. He's like a genius. Like I worship at his lotus feet kind of thing on all things aviation and industrial supply chains. So if you think I'm smart, he's actually a lot smarter than me. The problem is he never talks. And there's a lot more people like that who I think don't want to be named. Some of them are actually within the forces who don't want to be named because, they know what the problem is, but they don't want to talk in public. Next. What is your opinion on the IAF introducing the new C295? Did we need it and how good are they? They're very good. They're very good. And we definitely needed it. There is a need for that particular thing. My personal this thing is that we shouldn't be doing all this crap about light, medium, and high end. We should have bought the C17 line and focused on producing about 100 of the C17s because the C17 line was up for purchase after US production ended. We should have bought it and produced about 100 of those and kept it going at low rate productions, which India can do at a much better price than America could. And I do believe even now, do you remember there was always talk of this medium transport aircraft with Russia for the last 15, 20 years, which has never materialized? I think we should have joined, instead of the C95, we should have joined the KC390, the Brazilian Embraer program, and we should have introduced a lot of that. It would have brought in a lot of the dynamics of the C-295 with, excellent short takeoff and landing and rural performance and things like that. So personally, I would have said, instead of going for these 3-4 different kinds of transport aircraft, focus on just a fleet of 2, KC-390 from Brazil and C-17 by the old production line. But meri kaun sunta hai? Next. Rajneesh, what is the deal with Tejasvi Surya in Karnataka? You have to be more specific than that, Rajneesh. I don't know what is the deal with Tejasvi in Karnataka. Tejasvi is a very dear friend of mine, but I don't know what's the deal with him. He's insanely popular in his own constituency. And if you noticed, he was deployed quite widely in urban Bangalore. And urban Bangalore, they won very handsomely in this election. Next. Siddhave, is Shashi Tharoor a true nationalist? Yes, he is. But he has to toe the party line every now and then. And he's got a constituency that's very mixed. But I know for a fact Shashi Tharoor is a genuine nationalist and a very smart one at that, by the way. So, don't go by Twitter posturing. Like the Congress sometimes postures, but when they're in power, they're ruthless. My real worry about the Congress has become Rahul Gandhi because he actually believes his own bullshit. Never believe somebody who believes their own propaganda. Next. Kapesh Verma. How does space exploration affect defense? Lots. Propulsion technologies, detection technologies. Space is the absolute cutting edge where you spend a heck of a lot of money. And all of that ends up trickling down into defense. Everything. Literally everything. Your space propulsion is directly linked to your ballistic missile and missile program. That's why I said propulsion, just to explain that. There is no two missile programs in the world which are not co-joined with the space programs. Okay, you can develop a missile program without a space program, sure, but it is never as effective and commercially viable. You can literally write off the costs of your missile program with your space program. And that is why the most successful missile programs like Russia, China, India, France, and America are conjoined with their missile space and missile are conjoined. This is why Britain does not produce an ICBM of its own, because it would be ruinously expensive to produce its own ICBM. So it builds its own submarine and buys American Trident missiles to put on those submarines. Next. Avinash Naik, people say crude oil will dry up in a few decades, but we haven't explored more than 90% of the ocean beds. Yes, there is a lot of shale oil to be extracted. I agree. Huge amounts of shale oil to be extracted. The point isn't just, crude oil. Shale extraction is extremely damaging. Do you know how shale works? See, shale is basically, it's all kinds of material in which, think of it as a sponge into which the oil is soaked. So first you have to drill. Sometimes the drilling is shallow, but sometimes the drilling is quite deep. And deep drilling has its dangers all of its own in the seismic and tectonic plate area. Now, compounding the dangers of deep drilling is the fact of what goes in. How do you squeeze the sponge? I mean, you can't go physically in there and squeeze it like that so that the oil comes out. So you put in a highly toxic bunch of chemicals down there which dissolve rock or whatever material is in there. These are patented formulas, but they are highly toxic. Imagine an acid so powerful that it is dissolving rock in minutes and pushing it down so that all the oil, essentially pushing the sponge down so that all the oil comes to the top and then gets extracted. Do you really want that kind of toxic crap that dissolves rock and soil going down and contaminating your water resources and things like that, and God knows what else? Because we still don't know the long-term effects of if and when it is going to leach up. But in many cases where shale extraction is happening, you can literally set water alight. Streams flowing in shale extraction areas, you take water, you take a matchstick to it, you can light up the water. That is what is happening. Do you really want to go down that path? So, this movement towards green energy is very good, but we need to move towards hydrogen and not EVs, because EVs, the kind of materials used in batteries, are highly corrosive. Nobody's really talking about the environmental impact of all those corrosive liquids inside the batteries and the level of waste that will pile up after a while. Next. Aditya B. Did Israel ever face diplomatic difficulties when Mossad assassinated enemy elements on foreign soil? Isn't RAW applying a Mossad template? I don't know what you're talking about, because RAW does not assassinate people. I think Niger shot himself, boss. I don't think he was shot by anybody else. I think, it was different avatars of Niger who came in that grey car and shot him. So I really don't know what the second part of your question is about, Aditya. I'm sorry, I don't follow these things, so I really don't know. But to answer the first part, yes, Mossad faced a lot of difficulties. There was the botched assassination of Norway. They killed the wrong man. Do you know the assassination in Norway that happened? They identified the guy as a Palestinian. He wasn't. He was actually a genuine restaurant worker who had just gotten married and had a baby. And he was the brother of the singer of Gypsy Kings. You know Gypsy Kings, that famous band which sing Volare, ta ta ta, cantare, oh, that song, very famous band. The singer there, his brother was the one who was killed by the Mossad, and it caused a lot of problems. The killings in Dubai caused a lot of problems. Uh, the attempted assassination of, I think it was Khalid Mishal in Jordan, caused a lot of problems, because I think it was Khalid Mishal. I think it was because what happened was Jordanian intelligence managed to catch the two assassins, and they beat them up and refused to let them go till Netanyahu provided the antidote to the poison that had been injected. So, they've actually faced a lot of diplomatic difficulties. People don't talk about it. Next. Satyabrata Mohanty. Do tell about elections in MP Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh. What about them? I think Congress is going to win MP by a huge majority, two-thirds majority. Chhattisgarh, Congress will manage to win, not by a big majority, but they'll win. Rajasthan is touch and go, boss. Even the BJP is telling me it's tough. 𝙒𝙧 𝙤𝙬𝙆. How do you see Indian Maldives relations changing with the new anti-India president? Has India out changed from being a campaign slogan to government policy? It hasn't yet changed to government policy, but I suspect it will. And like Sri Lanka, they will find out very, very quickly that, embrace China with caution. Next. Abhijit, does India pick the Mauritius NSA? No, we do not, Anshuman. We absolutely do not. They pick their own NSA. Next. What would you do to trigger a renaissance in India if you were an emperor of India in 500 AD? I don't think there was much you could do at that point, Pradeep, because there was climate change driven de-urbanization happening globally. The Roman Empire had de-urbanized, everybody had de-urbanized starting at this point. This was the end of classical antiquity, and there was massive de-urbanization happening across the globe. I doubt anybody could have done anything at that point of time. Okay, because you can't fight de-urbanization. You can't fight climate change with the technologies available at that point of time. If it was today's technologies, of course you could. In those days, you could not. And what made things worse was the fact that, it was the de-urbanization that started the rigidification of caste, as happens. Urbanization lends to homogenization. De-urbanization lends to tribalization, which is what caste is, in a sense. And that is what you see, and that is what broke our ability to resist invaders. Because remember, till about 700-800 almost, we were able to resist invaders very, very well. And suddenly, the net weight of de-urbanization becomes so bad. And, internal division, which is to say castes and things, becomes so rigid, you simply can't do it anymore. And it is more than caste, it is the notion of superiority, of cavalry related with caste, that only the upper castes can ride horses, that becomes very problematic. So there's nothing you could literally do at that point of time. Next. 𝗏𝗏𝗍, isn't Khalistan a rehash of Jinnah's two-nation theory? Well, look, all separatist movements aren't Jinnah's two-nations theory, boss. Its proponents believe it is desire to hurt India and Hindus. Yeah, look, that is, I mean, all separatist movements are driven by that. So, it's bad analogy. Next. 𝗏𝗏𝗍, can Indian limit money remittances between India and Canada? Yes, you can. Also, do not allow Canadian companies to have development BPO teams in India and ban investing in India. Well, that you're hurting yourself, no? You're hurting yourself out there. The investment in India, they have almost $55 billion of the pension funds invested in India. But seizure of that is the nuclear option. Or even, putting it on hold and saying no dividend or interest will accrue to Canada till they take action on Khalistan, because it goes back to funding terror. That is also a nuclear option because it affects everybody's investments in India. So, you need to be on very strong footing to be able to do things like that. But cash remittance, yes, I believe it should be controlled because most of the cash remittances go towards funding all this drug running and gun running crap. Next. Krishna, root cause of communal issues in India is falling Hindu population. Hindu TFR less than 2, Muslim TFR 2.3. For second child, we can improve Hindu TFR to above 2. You know what? The Muslim in Kerala is being, and UP is actually being compensated by the Hindu in UP. Do you know that? Do you know that? It's really not happening. There is a very significant sterile issue happening in Muslim communities because there is so much inbreeding happening among Sunnis. The estimate is somewhere between 20%, based on medical statistics, 20% of the Muslim population is sterile. And 20% is what we know from formal data that I've seen. I don't think it's public. The informal estimate is if it's 20% formally, it's almost 40% in private. It's actually really bizarre. And they don't realize, their worry is that we are injecting them, we're sterilizing them through injection, which is why there is this hesitancy for vaccines and things like that. Why do you think that hesitancy comes about? They are not connecting it to the fact that they are in consanguineous marriages, which is producing systemic infertility in the community. But yes, I think tax rebates is good, except what you're going to achieve with it. The best way of controlling this is industrialization, which limits everybody's TFR. Next. Nitin Singh, hey Abhijit, the problem areas which will never allow India to be a superpower. Any follow-up talk? Do you see any improvements? No, not really. No improvements and no follow-up talk because I don't see any improvements. Next. Kanda Batata, what exactly would happen when Israel does a ground invasion? I suspect a lot of the communications will blank out the visuals we get from a ground invasion. I expect significant Israeli losses, but it will depend. We've already seen, I'm amazed at how quickly the Israelis have adapted and how quickly the Russians and Ukrainians have still not adapted. One very simple way of overcoming drones, because drones can only carry, these commercial drones, they can only carry about 2-3 kgs worth of explosives or even less, but they can take out whole tanks, is to put the kind of bar armor, the cage armor we saw American MRAPs come up with in Iraq. The Russians and Ukrainians haven't done it even after a year and a half, almost 2 years of war. Whereas the Israelis, within the first week, had started putting cage armor. See, their front and back are very well defended of the Merkava. but the roof is the weak part, and they started putting cage armor on top. They're doing it very rapidly, boss. The Israelis adapt extremely rapidly. So, I'm waiting to see. This is going to be a test case of if their active defense systems like the Trophy perform and if their cage armor performs. I'm waiting to see. It is going to be a test case. This should not become like the first Russian invasion of Chechnya, where in Grozny, when the tanks went in, they pummeled Grozny for the first 2-3 weeks, for almost a month with shelling, reduced it to rubble. And then when they went in, the rubble had created new tunnels and things, and all their armored formations were decimated. But Israelis are not making the mistake. If you've seen the current armored thrusts, they are being sent with the ground infantry to shoot Hamas infantry who come and aim ATGMs at these guys. Plus, of course, there's the drones and things like that, which they're building cage armor around. I really want to see. This is going to be an object study on if they've learned their own lessons from the Lebanon War of 2006, which was counted as a failure. There will be significant casualties on Israel, but I think overall, I think we have a fairly clear idea of what Israel is going to do. Next. Will Canada offer asylum to the 2 million plus civilians in Gaza who do not want to be crossfire? No, boss. You know that's not happening, and I know that's not happening. Neither is any Arab country offering them asylum. Revanth Reddy. Women are recognized to be left-wing generally? Rarely? No. Yet BJP has overwhelming women appeal. Is it because of welfare schemes, or are there any sociological reasons for it? Revanth, I have not seen these studies where women are left-wing. I have not seen them. Quite the contrary, women tend to have a very socially, fiscally conservative approach to running the house. I have not seen these studies. And indeed, if the BJP is getting as much support from women, it's clearly not the case that women are left wing, right? Next, Ishan. What is an emergency government like what is happening in Israel? It's a government of national unity where all the parties decide to set aside political differences for the period of the war. How is it different from a normal government duty wise? A normal government keeps getting criticized by the opposition for everything. A government of national unity will only get criticized on security grounds, and the criticism is kept to within cabinet, and the cabinet listens. They don't use their majority in parliament to overwhelm the opposition parties, which are now part of the government, get a hearing and they get their way with the government, and it is built on consensus. There is no unnecessary opposition. Everybody realizes what unnecessary opposition is when your life is on the line, and it is controlled, and they have a very successful history of doing this. Anything happened in the West Bank? A lot happening in the West Bank, because remember, there were Hamas cells growing up in Jenin and Nablus, and they are being pounded. Also lots of ground arrests happening out there and ground incursions. Next. Manikanta. Also some rumors saying Israeli spies are killed by Hamas. Yeah, because Israel has a very extensive human intelligence network. Arabs. They're not Israelis. They are Arab spies for Israel. And 90% of them are scapegoated, but 10% of them presumably would actually be spies for the Israelis. And remember, Hamas is also very sophisticated in counterintelligence. When operations keep getting compromised, the same place gets hit. They figure out who all were told, and they will tell different people the different times which rockets are going where. And when the rocket gets preemptively hit, after about 3-4 times, there was only one person common to all 4 hits, and they know that one person is the one who leaked. Next. Ashish Sharma. KSA and UAE were trying to improve relations with Israel, but Hamas screwed everything. They haven't screwed everything. I can tell you for a fact, KSA in private is actually encouraging Israel quite a bit. They're just telling Israel, you destroy Hamas, but please spare us the PR embarrassment, because we have to keep criticizing you in public. So, things aren't what they seem in private. A lot of Arab countries are, in fact, they'll be vicious in public. In private, they are gung-ho about Israel. And Same thing happens in Pakistan, and who is who? I didn't understand the second part of the question. Sorry. Next. Arvind TSI, which one do you lean towards more during Navratri? Golu Bommai and Lalita Sahasranamam and Durga Puja and Rashagolla. Why? Durga Puja. It's just more dramatic, more fun, and more social. Here, people are coming to your house. I don't like people coming to my house. And I prefer going out and meeting lots of people in a almost party-like atmosphere. That's why. Next. And I'm much more of a Durga Bhakt as much as an atheist can be a Bhakt, I guess. Durga is my 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙀 and she's my family deity as well. So, yeah. Next. Ishan Sharma, with conservatives gaining power in NZ, do you see the same happening in CN, US, UK, Bharat, future ideology, center-left parties have gone far left? Yes, but it's a global thing. Even in India, the left has become far left. It's become loony left, and the right is actually becoming more center left in a way. Yeah. Next. Mr. Lee, South Africa has been quite vociferous in condemning Israel. How close were the military ties between Israel and the apartheid regime? Did SA get its nuclear tech from Israel? Yes, South Africa did get a lot of its, it was collaborative. They collaborated on the nuclear bomb. So yes, it was almost like a joint development. We don't know who gave who what. The uranium, a lot of uranium for Israel's bombs came from South Africa. Okay, but we also need to remember that the only white people who opposed apartheid in South Africa were Jews. You look at the list of all the white people who opposed apartheid in South Africa, they were all, to a man, they were all Jews. Okay, and some Presbyterians, I think, as well, but overwhelmingly they were Jews. Okay, now why has South Africa been vociferous? Look at the religious dynamic in South Africa. I think Muslims are a large part of the population. Let me just check. Uh, Islam is 1.5% of the population. You better keep them happy. It's really that simple. And it's much bigger than Hinduism, which is 1.2. And they still, they don't thank the Jews for opposing apartheid. They hold Israel to be kind of responsible for. They see a lot of parallels between what was done to them and what is being done, because townships and colonies, this ghettoization that happens, which is what Gaza and West Bank are. They view it as there's a lot of historical analogy out there. I think it's misplaced because it's not the perfect analogy, but they see these black townships, Bantustans as they were called, to be what Gaza and West Bank have become. So that's a lot of historical baggage plus Muslim population, plus forgetting which whites oppose this and the nuclear program and military cooperation. Next. Abhay Agarwal, Italy and Japan are facing socio-economic issues due to low TFR. How does Israel have high TFR even after industrialization? Very good question, because the government incentivizes it. There was a question sometime back on why we should, provide rebates and things. They do, and they are all encouraged to keep the population up because the government provides huge amounts of incentives to keep the population up. Okay, everything in Israel is looked after. They have a fantastic welfare state. Your health, your education, and there is no education competition. Any kid can join any college in any subject that he really wants in Israel, as long as he fits the entry criteria and things like that. There is no shortage of college seats and so on and so forth. In fact, there's a significant surplus. So they are able to make the life of much more. The state bears a much greater responsibility. Society and community bear a much greater responsibility for the child. They live in communities where children don't. In the West, you need children to be escorted everywhere. You can't leave a kid alone at home. uh, you have to hire a babysitter and things. In Israel, the kids are just allowed to roam around by themselves. They take the bus by themselves. They don't need it. It's a very, very secure environment. So, things like this, which reduce the sort of financial and time burden on parents, plus the massive government incentives. The more you produce, you get access to better housing, more housing, uh, uh, the housing lottery, you're preferred in the housing lottery and things like that. Huge incentive scheme. Next. Film 66, Israel is waiting and watching the developments in Gaza before launching a full frontal attack. Is there a threat from countries like Turkey, Lebanon, and Iran should Israel launch an attack? Preemptive? No. But Lebanon especially, yes. We don't know how Iran is going to deploy Hezbollah, but I suspect Hezbollah is going to get deployed. They let Gaza take the worst of the pounding, and then they will deploy after Gaza has taken the worst of the pounding, or at the peak of the Gaza pounding. That is when Hezbollah will move in to open a second front. They won't open a simultaneous second front. What Hezbollah is doing at the moment is they're gauging. People are looking at, one or two Israeli killed for 44 Hezbollah killed. What they're not seeing is these are all probing attacks by Hezbollah. They're seeing what are the thresholds, how much can they provoke, how much can they not. There are something like, we suspect, close to about 2 to 300,000, 2 to 3 lakh rockets with Hamas. Now, if they've got that many rockets, can you imagine the kind of destruction? And we've seen how accurate these rockets have become. Before they weren't. Before, all of them did not need interception. Now, at least 20 to 30% of them need interception. 20 to 30%, say even 10%. 10% of about 3 lakh rockets is 30,000 rockets, boss. More, 30,000 rockets. 30,000 rockets being intercepted by an Iron Dome, which is very expensive, is insane. They are not going to be able to intercept that much. And when they land, we've now seen the accuracy of these rockets. When they land, it's going to be quite disastrous. I don't think people realize this. So today, Hezbollah is in a position to inflict lots of heavy damage. We saw how INS Khanit, the Israeli stealth corvette, was hit by a Chinese anti-ship missile during the last Lebanon conflict. No, they have many more of those missiles, so we don't know what's going to happen out there. So Lebanon, almost certain escalation. The question is, when does Iran come in and how does Iran come in? Because Iran doesn't have the air assets to deploy. Ground assets are proxy Hezbollah. Will they do what Saddam Hussein did in 91 and fire Scuds, which is to say long-range missiles at Israel? And then what will the Israeli response be? And then will Iran use it as an excuse to go nuclear? As in not drop nuclear bombs, but say, oh, the world has failed and we now have to detonate a nuclear device and declare ourselves a nuclear power. Next. Madhav Rao, will Israel do payback to Iran, China now, future? Yes, slowly. Slowly. They always pay back. China, not directly, because they only pay back when you have actually killed citizens. China hasn't killed citizens, but they will now stop all technology flowing to China for sure. Next. Will Pak get payback from Israel for training Hamas? Boss, that picture was a fake picture. I don't think there's any proof for Pakistan training Hamas. Next. 𝙒𝙧𝙤, why does BJP do this Hindi national language stuff? I'm a native Hindi speaker. Yes, I think it unnecessarily alienates the South Indian Hindus. All languages are equal. I agree with that. I don't know why they keep doing it, boss. I think it's an unnecessary conversation to have, because the way you do it is not speaking about it and allowing TV and pop culture to do the job. Allow industrial development to do the job where, there's cross-pollination happening, like it happened in Italy. In Italy and in France, the French we consider French today was only spoken by Paris. It started getting spoken by France only about 100 to 70 years back. Otherwise, there were severe regional dialects. Italy had completely different languages. Sardinian is almost a completely different language. It is still a Romance language, but it's a very different language, right? Calabrian dialects of Italian are totally different. Calabrian and Neapolitan dialects are very different from Tuscan. Tuscan is the modern accepted Italian as we know it. And when Italy started speaking Italian, it was in the 60s with the introduction of TV. We need to allow technology to overtake. But then again, see, there's a setback in that because Hindi movies aren't doing very well. It's the southern film industry that's actually coming up more than the northern film industry, even though people like, that 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪 fellow and things, they're all complete bloody liberandus who give Prakash Raj and that other chutia, what's his name? Sushant Singh, not the Sushant Singh who died, the other Sushant Singh who runs that team Saath, time in his this thing. So, even there, maybe they were panicking because of that. I don't know. Next. Adi Venkatesh, the sentence could be revised as, is it accurate to equate left liberal Islamic jihadist and deep state ideologies, or is communism seeking to conceal itself within this confluence? And no, communism has always had a tie-up with Islamist jihad till they come to power. Pan-victimhood, not just Islamism, pan-victimhood and communism have always been best friends. Institutional capture has always been the common goal of both of these. Right wing hates institutions, period. They are all about personal liberty and freedom. Communism and pan-Islamism is all about institutions, control, and capture. Okay, so they have always been the best of friends till they come to power, when they become each other's worst enemies, and they are the first to eliminate the other when they come to power. Next. Ashish Sharma. In many conflicts, I've seen loser get support and powerful ridicule. Loser gets support and the powerful get ridiculed. Yes, like Israel versus Palestine. Palestine gets support even in the West. Is it new in? No, it's always the underdog. No, it's human nature to support the underdog. Bechara, etc., etc. It doesn't matter that Bechara is a crook, but Hamesha, the underdog always gets support, boss. It's human nature to support the underdog. It's that fundamental sense of justice we have somewhere. Misplaced, but we don't think about just because somebody's stronger, we think bully. No, that's not the way it is. Next. Avinash Naik, where will you draw the line for capitalist society? Clearly, US is beyond the line where someone's problem is someone else's profit. See, America started off with capitalism, which did not overtake government. But what has happened is the information revolution has seen monopolies like the recreation of the East India Company, which is very dangerous. The East India Company was mercantilist. It was not capitalist. And it overtook the government. It was more powerful than the British government. It controlled the British government. Today, capital controls the American government. You need a sense of balance. We accept that that government should stay out of business. We have still not legislated for business to stay out of government, and that is desperately required. Next. Chaitanya YSK, can India sign a deal with Russia to sell all Soviet technology so that India can have military supply chain? Yes, but you really want Soviet technology. You've seen what's been happening in Ukraine, no? Do you want to fight endless wars like that, Chaitanya? Next. Shaheen Vahman Zadegan. The Sasanian Spahbad, Shahwaraz from the royal House of Mihran, wanted to rebuild the third temple after the conquest of Jerusalem in 614. Yes, he did, and that is when Khosrow captured Jerusalem. But here's the thing. The Sassanids also went back on that promise, remember? And the Byzantines captured it back very quickly. So there is a whole thing where apparently some taxes were imposed, despite promises that taxes would not be imposed. And the Jews felt very disappointed. They did want to build the temple back, but somewhere, and it mostly, and this shows you the contradictions even within. Because the Iran Spahbad wanted to have the temple rebuilt because he was in charge of the campaign, he knew. But there were other people within government, the others of the, what was it, the 7 or the 12 great families, who did not want the temple rebuilt because they wanted tax revenue and things like that. And this is why when the Arab conquest happens, You know, uh, the cataphracts, the Grapanwar, the nobility, the heavy armored cavalry are not able to be mobilized in time. People forget that 60 to 70% of the Iranian army wasn't even mobilized to counter the Arab invasion when it happened. Yazdard was running away more and more east and get killed by his own governor when his nobles aren't even rising up. And you need to go see the kind of internecine warfare that was happening between Khusro and his successors and things. And you know, the first two female empresses of Iran also, Porandokht and Azarmiyadokht, at that point of time. So yeah, uh, it and notice how they were. I think they were both killed, no, and removed from power. So it was a complete state of imperial collapse at that point of time. Too much infighting happening. Thank you so much. I hope I pissed all of you off. And if I pissed all of you off, feel free to abuse us. Leave comments, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for subscribing to P Gurus. Thank you.